One day in class, the teacher has education. On the blackboard, she draws a penis, then asks the class if any of them knows what it is. In the back of the room, Dirty Johnny stands and says, "That's a penis, and my father has two of them." The teacher looks surprised and asks, "What do you mean, two?" Dirty Johnny responds, "A little one to pee, and a big one to brush the babysitter's teeth." Harry and his wife are having hard financial times, so they decide that she'll become a hooker. She's not quite sure what to do, so Harry says, "Stand in front of that bar and pick up a guy. Tell him that you charge $100. If you got a question, I'll be parked around the corner." She's standing there for 5 minutes when a guy pulls up and asks, "How much?" She says, $100. He says, "All I got is 30. She says, "Hold on," and runs back to Harry and asks, "What can he get for 30? "A hand job," Harry reply. She runs back and tells the guy all he gets for $30 is a hand job. He agrees. She gets in the car. He unzips his pants and out pops this huge. She stares at it for a minute and then says, "I'll be right back." She runs back to Harry and asks, "Can you loan this guy $70? A man is walking past this house when a used condom comes flying out of the second-story window and lands squarely on his head. Rather disgusted and absolutely furious, he goes up to the front door and starts pounding on it. An elderly man opens it and asks him what caused him to knock so loudly. The passerby asks, "Who's in your upstairs room?" The elderly man replies, "I can't see how it's any of your business." "Since you must know, my daughter and intended son-in-law are upstairs." The passerby hands him the used condom and says, "Well, I just wanted you to know that your intended grandchild fell out the window." This man got his prescription for Viagra and goes home to get ready for when his wife gets home. He calls her on the phone and says, "I'll be home in an hour." "Perfect," she replies. The man thinks her agreement is because the doctor told him to take his an hour before. He takes the Viagra and waits. Well, an hour goes by, the man is ready to go, but no wife. She calls him on the phone and she says, "Traffic is terrible. I won't be there for about an hour and a half." The man, frustrated, calls his doctor for advice. "What should I do?" he asks. The doctor replied, "It would be a shame to waste it." "Do you have a housekeeper around?" "Yes," the man replied. "Well, maybe you can occupy yourself with her instead," said the doctor. The man then replied with dismay, "But I don't need Viagra with the housekeeper. I bought a beautiful parrot from a pet shop. When I got it home, I put it on a perch, and it started swearing foul language. I ignored it until one day when my mom was here for dinner. It swore so badly, I said, 'Enough!' I grabbed the parrot and put it in the deep freeze for 5 minutes. When I finally got it out of the fridge, it quietly said, 'I do apologize for my bad language. It was uncalled for, and it will never happen again.' May I ask, what did the chicken do?" Maria is a devout Catholic. She gets married and has 17 children. Then her husband dies. She remarries 2 weeks later and has 22 children by her next husband. Then he dies. A while later, she dies. At the funeral, the priest looks skyward and says, "At least they're finally together." A guy sitting in the front row says, "Excuse me, Father, but do you mean her and her first husband or her and her second husband?" The priest says, "I mean her legs." A guy walks into the employment office and says with a big sigh, "Look, I'm tired of sitting around. I don't want handouts. I want a real job." The staff member perks up and says, "Well, you're in luck. A new opening just came in this morning." The guy leans in, curious. "Oh, yeah. What's the job?" The worker replies, A retired millionaire needs someone to drive his luxury car, live in a private guest house, and travel the world as his daughter's personal assistant. All expenses paid. Food, clothing, housing, even vacations. Starting pay is $200,000. The guy's eyes nearly pop out of his head. "You're joking," the worker smirks. "Yeah, but you started it." A man drinks a shot of rum every night before bed. After many years of this, the wife wants him to quit, so she decides her course of action. She gets 2 shot glasses, filling one with water and the other with rum. After getting him to the table that had the glasses, she brings his fishing bait box. She says, "I want you to see this." She puts a worm in the water and it swims around. She puts a worm in the rum, and the worm dies immediately. She then says, feeling that she has made her point clear, "What do you have to say about this experiment?" He responds by saying, "If I drink rum, I won't get worms." 2 couples were playing cards. Jeff accidentally dropped some cards on the floor. When he bent down under the table to pick them up, he noticed that Dave's wife, Sandy, was not wearing any underwear. Shocked by this, Jeff hit his head on the table and emerged red-faced. Later, when Jeff went to the kitchen to get some refreshments, Sandy followed him and asked, "Did you see anything under the table that you liked?" Jeff admitted, "Well, yes, I did." She said, "You can have it, but it will cost you $100. After a minute or two, Jeff indicates that he is interested. She tells him that since Dave works Friday afternoons and Jeff doesn't, that Jeff should come to their house around 2 p.m. on Friday. Friday came, and Jeff went to her house at 2 p.m. After paying her the $100, they went to the bedroom, had sex for a few hours, and then Jeff left. Dave came home about 6 p.m. and asked his wife, "Did Jeff come by this afternoon?" Totally shocked, Sandy replied, "Yes, he did stop by for a few minutes." Next, Dave asked, "Did Jeff give you $100? Sandy thought, "Oh, he knows." Reluctantly, she said, "Yes, he did give me $100. "Good," Dave says. "Jeff came by the office this morning and borrowed the $100 from me and said that he'd stop by our house on his way home and pay me back. It's so good to have a friend you can trust." A mother and her young daughter were walking through New York City when the mother tried to hail a cab. As they waited, the little girl noticed a group of women dressed in flashy clothes loitering on a street corner. Finally, the mother got a cab, and they climbed in. The curious little girl turned to her mother and asked, "Mommy, what are those ladies doing over there?" The mother, trying to dodge the question, replied, "Oh, those ladies are just waiting for their husbands to come pick them up on their way home from work." The cab driver, overhearing the exchange, turned around and said, "Come on, lady, tell your daughter the truth. They're hookers." There was a brief pause of awkward silence. Then the little girl, with a confused look, asked, "Mommy, do the hooker ladies have children?" The mother, without missing a beat, replied, "Of course, dear. Where do you think cabbies come from?" An elderly woman decided to join a prestigious country club. One morning, she overheard a group of men discussing their golf game and, with a confident smile, chimed in. "I used to play on my college golf team, and I was pretty good. Mind if I join you next week?" The men exchanged skeptical glances, clearly not taking her seriously. One of them, thinking he could politely discourage her, said, "Sure, but we tee off at 6:30 a.m. To their surprise, she said cheerfully, "Perfect." Though I might be 15 minutes late. They rolled their eyes but agreed. Come the next week, she showed up exactly at 6:30 and stunned them all with a brilliant round. 2 under par. Not only was she a great golfer, but she was also sharp-witted and fun to be around. Impressed, the men invited her to join them again the following week. She accepted with a grin. "I'll be there, 6:30 sharp, or maybe 6:45. Next week, she arrived right on time again. But this time, she played left-handed. Incredibly, she still beat them, finishing even par. The men were completely baffled. Yet again, they invited her back, determined to figure her out. The third week, she was 15 minutes late as promised. That day, she played right-handed and still managed to edge out a win. Though her timing annoyed them slightly, her charm and constant compliments on their swings made it hard to stay frustrated. After the game, over drinks at the clubhouse, one of the men finally asked, "We've got to know. How do you decide whether to play right-handed or left-handed?" Blushing slightly, the woman leaned in with a playful smile and said, "Well, I'm ambidextrous, so I can play either way. Years ago, I came up with a little routine. Before I leave for golf, I pull the covers off my husband. He sleeps in the nude. If his equipment points to the right, I play right-handed. If it points to the left, I play left-handed." The men burst into laughter, completely caught off guard by her answer. Still chuckling, one of them asked, "What if it's pointing straight up?" She winked and replied with a sly grin, "Then I'm 15 minutes late." A man died and went to heaven. As he stood in front of the pearly gates, he saw a huge wall of clocks behind him. He asked, "What are all those clocks for?" St. Peter answered, "Those are lie clocks. Everyone who has ever been on earth has a lie clock. Every time you lie, the hands on your clock move." "Oh," said the man, "whose clock is that?" "That's Mother Teresa's," replied St. Peter. "The hands have never moved, indicating that she never told a lie." "Incredible," said the man. "And whose clock is that one?" St. Peter responded, "That's Abraham Lincoln's clock. The hands have moved twice, telling us that Abraham Lincoln told only 2 lies in his entire life." "Where's Donald Trump's and Hillary Clinton's clocks?" asked the man. St. Peter replied, "We're using them as ceiling fans." A man was pulled over for speeding. As the police officer approached the vehicle, the man quickly asked, "Officer, may I step out of the car?" The cop agreed, and once the man was out, the officer asked, "Why were you in such a hurry?" The man pointed toward the car and said, "You see the woman in the front passenger seat? That's my wife. And the woman in the back seat? That's my mother-in-law. She's been living with us for the past 3 months." The man continued, "Well, this morning my wife and her mom got into a huge argument. My mother-in-law demanded we take her back to her house. Now I'm rushing to get her there as fast as possible before they make up and she changes her mind." The officer paused, looked over at the car, then back at the man, and said, "Sir, get back in your vehicle. I'll give you a police escort, with lights and sirens. Let's make sure she gets home." 2 guys pulled into a hardware store in an old pickup truck. One of them walked in and said, "Hey, we need some wood." 4x2s. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "Don't you mean 2x4s?" The guy scratched his head. Let me check with my buddy." He ran back out to the truck, had a quick chat, then came back in. "Yeah, you're right. 2x4s. The clerk nodded. "All right. How long do you need them?" The guy paused, confused. "Hang on." He hustled back to the truck again. A minute later, he returned, looking confident. "We're gonna need 'em for a real long time. We're building a whole house." A cowboy, who just moved to Montana from Texas, walks into a bar and orders 3 mugs of Bud. He sits in the back of the room, drinking a sip out of each one in turn. When he finishes them, he comes back to the bar and orders 3 more. The bartender approaches and tells the cowboy, "You know, a mug goes flat after I draw it. It would taste better if you bought one at a time." The cowboy replies, "Well, you see, I have 2 brothers. One is in Arizona, the other is in Colorado. When we all left our home in Texas, we promised that we'd drink this way to remember the days when we drank together. So I'm drinking one beer for each of my brothers and one for myself. The bartender admits that this is a nice custom and leaves it there. The cowboy becomes a regular in the bar and always drinks the same way. He orders 3 mugs and drinks them in turn. One day, he comes in and only orders 2 mugs. All the regulars take notice and fall silent. When he comes back to the bar for the second round, the bartender says, "I don't want to intrude on your grief, but I wanted to offer my condolences on your loss." The cowboy looks quite puzzled for a moment. Then a light dawns in his eyes, and he laughs. "Oh, no. Everybody's just fine," he explains. "It's just that my wife and I joined the Baptist church and I had to quit drinking. It hasn't affected my brothers, though." Inside a half-finished store in a Florida shopping center, 2 young guys in polo shirts leaned against the counter, sipping coffee and killing time. Their new shop wasn't open yet. Just bare walls, empty racks, and that unmistakable smell of fresh paint and ambition. One of them nudged the other, chuckling. "Just wait," he said, grinning. "Any minute now, some retiree's gonna shuffle by, peek in, and ask what we're selling. Happens every time." The other laughed. "Old folks are predictable, man." And as if summoned by the universe just to prove a point, an elderly gentleman strolled by, hands in his pockets. He paused, squinted through the window, and gave it a couple of polite taps with his knuckle. "What kind of store is this?" he called out with a curious smile. The young men locked eyes, smirking. "Smart Alec time," one whispered. Then louder, with a sarcastic grin, he replied, "We're selling wise guys like you, sir." The old man tilted his head, took a beat, and then replied, "Well, business must be booming. You've already got 2 on display." He winked and continued on his way like he'd just dropped the mic at a comedy club. The 2 youngsters stood frozen, faces redder than a fire truck. A struggling farmer named Joe had 5 female goats. Times were tough, feed prices were up, and he needed a plan. At the county fair, Joe met another farmer named Earl who had 5 male goats. Over a greasy corn dog and handshake, they made a deal. Let the goats get to know each other, split any future kids 50-50. But here was the challenge. Joe and Earl lived 60 miles apart, and neither had a trailer. So they agreed to meet halfway each time, 30 miles each, in an open field to let nature do its thing. The next morning, Joe woke up at 5 a.m., loaded his girls into his old rattling pickup, and met Earl. As the goats did their business, Joe asked, "So, how do I know if it worked?" Earl scratched his head and said, "Simple. If tomorrow morning they're lying in the grass, pregnant. If they're running through the mud, nope." The next morning, Joe looked out the window. Sure enough, goats in the mud. Disappointed but determined, he hosed them down, packed them up, and drove them out again. And again and again. 8 mornings, same routine, same muddy goats. By day 9, Joe was exhausted. He couldn't drag himself out of bed. He called out to his wife, "Sweetheart, can you check outside and tell me if the goats are in the mud or the grass?" She looked out the window and shouted, "Neither!" They're already in the truck, and one's honking the horn like they're late. A friend of mine recently got a surprise at her front door. A police car gently pulled into the driveway, and out stepped her 84-year-old grandfather, looking calm and collected. The officer smiled and explained, "We found him sitting on a bench at the city park." He flagged us down and asked for a ride home. My friend was stunned. "Grandpa, you've been going to that park for over 40 years. How did you get lost?" Grandpa just gave a cheeky grin and said, "Oh, I wasn't lost. I was just done walking and figured I'd let someone else handle the trip back. Work smarter, not harder. Grandpa style." One evening, a husband thought he'd be funny and took a jab at his wife. With a smirk, he said, Maybe we should start washing your clothes in Slim fast. It might help take a few inches off your backside. His wife didn't laugh. In fact, she made a mental note, because that comment wasn't going unanswered. The next morning, the husband reached into his drawer to grab a pair of underwear. As he pulled them out, a puff of white powder floated into the air. Confused, he shook them out and muttered, "What the heck is this?" Baffled and slightly irritated, he marched into the bathroom, holding the underwear up like evidence. "April, did you put talcum powder in my boxers?" Without missing a beat, his wife turned around with a sweet smile and said, "Oh no, honey, that's not talcum powder. It's Miracle Grow." 3 sisters were getting married one after another, just weeks apart. Their mother, a bit nervous but curious about how things would go on their honeymoons, made each of them promise to send her a postcard. Not with details, of course, just a word or two to hint at how things were going in their married lives. A few days after the first daughter left for her honeymoon in Hawaii, a postcard arrived. It had only one word: Nescafe. Puzzled, the mother went into the kitchen, grabbed a jar of Nescafe, and read the label. "Good till the last drop." She blushed but smiled, satisfied. The following week, another postcard arrived, this time from Vermont. It read, "Benson and Hedges." Raising an eyebrow, the mother reached for her husband's cigarette pack and read the tagline. "Extra long, king size." Now she was bright red, but clearly impressed. But the third daughter, who had gone to the Caribbean, didn't send anything for a while. A week passed, then 2, then an entire month. Finally, a postcard arrived. The handwriting was a bit shaky, and the message read only, "British Airways." Heart pounding, the mother rushed to her magazine rack and found the latest issue of Harper's Bazaar. Flipping through quickly, she located the British Airways ad. She read the slogan and fainted on the spot. It said, 3 times a day, 7 days a week, both ways.